It's everybody's dream to come up here and follow Corky Evans. Before I start, I want to say something that I think is really important, because I've been doing this now for almost 12 years, and I have to say I want to recognize my good friend the Chief and Angie from the Lower Kootenai Band, because I've never seen the involvement or the engagement that the Native Band has had here with this community before Jason became Chief. It's never been this focused, this much trying to work with us, and just what Corky just said, ladies and gentlemen, there will be a huge contingent that will be tied to the Columbia River Treaty with the Native population. So, Chief, thank you for being engaged in this. I also want to make sure that you guys recognize I'm not a liberal. If there was any doubt in anybody's mind, I'm going to bring greetings from David Wilk, my MP, who also is engaged in the water part of this. And I do also think it's fair to say that this is a good forum to get started, because all the parties need to start talking about how we do this across the country. So thank goodness I didn't want to speak about what Corky spoke about. I want to talk about governance for water systems and how we do this politically. And I want to warn you against people like myself and the regional district and other people that are elected, because the system that we now have in place is designed to fail if we don't get it under control. And I'm going to give you an example. In May 11th of 2000, a tiny town in Ontario, Walkerton, Ontario, about the same size as Creston, 5,000 people, had a situation where people became extremely ill and 7 people died as a result of water-contaminated E. coli, the worst E. coli. But it wasn't a water problem that really caused it. This was a municipal-operated water system, union worker-operated water system, where the people falsified the documentation on the water test, where they took the money they were supposed to use to buy chlorine and didn't buy chlorine and maybe bought booze or something else. It was a criminal activity. And there is no legislation in the world, ladies and gentlemen, that will stop that kind of nonsense. It's check and balance that will stop that from happening again. But as a result of Walkerton, everyone threw their hands up in the air and said, holy moly, there's $155 million in claims as a result of the Walkerton situation. All could have been avoided had they put the chlorine in the water. So as a result of that, every government across the country panicked, and they went to what I will call the professionals. I refer to them, and this is an endearment term for me, as propeller heads. The guys that sit in rooms that design things for NASA. And they said, come up with something to protect us, because the liability is too great. Instead of looking at the most basic things in terms of our water, what's broke? If it's not broke, let's not fix it. Let's fix the ones that are broke. So, and I want to make sure you all understand tonight that I'm not speaking as the chair of the Regional District of Central Kootenai. I'm speaking as the director for Area B. And I'm also going to speak a little bit as the chair of the Hospital District, because when we're talking about water, we're talking about health. And so I'm going to tell you tonight that if you drink the water of the chair, if you drink the water at our hospital, if you drink the water at any 8 or 9 of our medical facilities in the Kootenai, it's all single barrier treatment. Just one barrier. Not 43210, which you'll hear later. One barrier treatment, because that's just the way it is. That's all we can afford. So the fact that these guys goofed up, and they went to jail, by the way, for doing what they did in Walkerton. Unfortunately, they didn't die. It was innocent people who died. It leaves us with a situation where the government, in its wisdom, come out and said, let's create a system top down. So outcome-based legislation, which means that they design it, and then we're the very last people to talk to them about what's going to happen. So I'm going to tell you tonight that we need a common denominator to protect you from us. And that common denominator, ladies and gentlemen, is a single definition across this country. Whether you're liberal, NDP, or conservative as I am, we need one definition. And that definition should be very simply 1 or 2 sentences like this. And I actually wrote it down so I wouldn't forget it. All drinking water throughout Canada must meet a minimum standard of 1 treatment regimen, not to be boiled water. If we had that as the law of the land, then we could operate our water systems all of our water systems and start working toward the goal of 43210. 80% of all the small water systems are in the Kootenai. If we try to convert them to 43210, which is the ultimate NASA-style water treatment, that's a $1.5 billion unfunded mandate. It will break you. You cannot afford to do it. And the worst part of it is, most of your water is fine. Your water's not broken. I chair a hospital district where people are coming in sick, but they're not sick for the most part because of anything that has to do with water. They're really sick of paying higher taxes. They're sick of a government they don't think is responsive to them. And they're sick of the fact you don't seem to have any more control over their own destiny. So I'm telling you tonight that no matter who your elected official is, no matter who you deal with, do not be sold on the fact that we govern by crisis, because if you do that, we all lose. In fact, the former Chief of Staff of the President of the United States, Rahm Emanuel, said, "I never met a crisis I didn't like." And the problem is, when you govern by crisis like we did with Walkerton, you create a scenario that is not realistic in today's life. It's not realistic for us to charge all these small water systems the kind of fees that we would get them to pay if they had to put in all this treatment regimen. Most of the water is good. In fact, all the water is good until you get sick. And then we don't test for Giardia and we don't test for Cryptosporidium. We do that after the fact. I'm telling you right now, don't fear your water. Fear the fact that we have built into this a bureaucratic system to scare you to death, thinking that you're going to die from some waterborne illness when the facts do not show that at all. Period. Zero. Zip. Nada. I'm bilingual. That's Spanish. So hold our feet to the fire. Call your representatives. Call your counselors. Call your mayors. And call your premier and the people in the government and say, we need a single definition for water standards, not only in this province, but across this country. And until we do that, we're going to be subject to fees that you will not even comprehend. I just had to raise last year's water rates in Erickson by 60% to the fruit growers in Erickson, because that was part of our deal with the town of Creston. We were trying to keep our fruit growers competitive based on what Corky's saying about the United States. 60%, and that's just a start. Well, let me tell you, if we could just have one barrier of treatment, I could drop that back down and we could be competitive again. We need to get realistic about the way we govern, and we need you more involved. So when you go to the polls this next year, or you go anywhere where you see a politician like myself, or like the other folks that you know, stop them and say, we want accountability from you folks. If you spend us blind, we will boot your ass out next time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, John. This is not because of Corky's talk or John's talk, but we did get started late and we did waste some time. We kind of think you need a stretch. How would you like to stand up for 60 seconds and stretch your legs, turn around, say hello to your neighbor, and we'll get the next person up here in the panel.